Good evening and welcome to Nycos. Yes, we have been doing these episodes as Nycos Nightly News, and I still have the header on it for that. But there are going to be some serious changes being made to the channel in the next few days, and one of the changes is coming on tonight. I've made a couple of changes to the set and such. Now, you're not going to notice it yet because I'm still using the header here, but there's going to be some changes to that. And I also wanted to kind of change the way I've been presenting. So if you see any change and you like it, make sure to give me a thumbs up. Let me know. If you haven't been with us before, I'm Jonathan Albin, also known as Game Master J. I'm a storyteller and game master with nearly 50 years of experience, dating all the way back to the 1970s. So yes, I am old. I know my hair looks a little gray, and yes, I'm a little bit old, but I think we'll get along just fine. So we're going to start off tonight with an update. It was actually a part of an episode I did the other day that seemed to not work out with the sound. So we're checking some things to see whether or not we can improve the sound output. If you have any questions or difficulties with sound, make sure you let me know in the chat, because I can make adjustments on the fly, as I just did by bringing the microphone closer. Anyway, so the first thing we're going to talk about is an update that I did, as I said, a couple of days ago, and the sound was poor on it, so I'm going to be updating the story. It will be a slightly different episode because, of course, I have new information about the goings-on in that group. So we're currently using Strangers in a Strange Land as the games group name, and the players include Asado, Axel when he's there, Bowden, Deborah, Melkor, Marianne, and others. So as players switch and adjust, we will change up the name of the players that are in the group, but this just kind of gives you an idea who is still here. So let me also take a second here and adjust the screen a bit. It's got two copies of my face on it, and I don't quite know why, so we're going to get rid of one of them for now. Here we go. So we are going to be talking about what's going on in the city of Potiphar, and the strangers made it there about 3 weeks ago, and they've been slowly getting to know the city a little bit better. They've gotten to meet several of the persona that they had not met before. They have gotten to be familiar with some of the goings-on, and were involved with pursuing at least one of the mysteries of the city last week. Now, at least two members of the adventuring party have discovered that there are strange markings that are manifesting on them in the forms of mystical tattoos that are suddenly appearing on them that, of course, they never signed up for. And they are in the form of manacles and chains on their wrists and ankles. And it seems as if there's something tying them to the city in a not so comfortable way. And so they're trying to decide not only what these marks represent, but also to perhaps find out why they are in particular being targeted. So there was an altercation during a party 2 weeks ago wherein Lord Turcival appeared to have been assassinated by a magical attack directly in front of the party. They had actually apprehended one of the villains and turned him over to the city guard, and the city guard seemed to be more concerned with the outcomes of the preparation of the upcoming Festival of Floods. Now, the city has been anticipating a return of the rainy weather that is supposed to be kicked off by a mystical ritual that is supposed to occur, and they've been counting down, and they were about 30 days out. As a matter of fact, the assassination had occurred at one of the introduction parties to the festival season. So they went and spoke with the leader of the Green Veil. This person that they spoke with, Eureka's was her last name, and this lady, Genya Eureka's, as the overseer for the Green Veil, offered peace and comfort to the adventurers, saying that they could stay within their walls as long as they were assisting with the ritual, and seemed to not even be aware that Lord Turcival had been assassinated. So they went and checked into it. They found out that the city governor is a guy by the name of Severin Novalent. And in speaking with some of his handlers, they found that he was not available, but that he was very concerned with the issues with Lord Percival and would definitely promised he would look into it. The adventurers then ran into a series of mysterious meetings in the dark, including an altercation with some waterborne being that they engaged down by the waterline. Then after that, they ran into members of the Last Laugh Guild, apparently laying hands on one of our associates by the name of Patches, and kind of working him over for some money he owed them. And while they didn't discover much about that, they did break up the fight and fundamentally saved his life as he was being beaten so badly. Of course, this led to a relationship issue between Keegan and the head of the Lantern Street orphanage. The young lady there, Gretchen, was also a gnome, and she was quite infatuated with our keymaster, if you will, Keegan Gelf. And they were investigating several disappearances, and they discovered even more of them had been kidnapped on the very night that the adventurers were there. So they had rescued Patches, but in a strange turn of events, shall we say, and perhaps not just a little but a lot, depended upon the players of the adventure group actually triggering the beginnings of the rainy season 30 days in advance of the ritual by something that was done. More can be discovered by talking to the players, of course, and it is rather curious that this would be the case. So I've now kind of reiterated the missing information from the episode the other day, and if you have any other questions, of course, you can feel free to reach out to me through Discord or through the chat box now, and or the comment section at NycosRPG.com. At NycosRPG on YouTube. Alrighty, so the next one we're going to do is a kind of a growing popularity feature, which is the Orders of the Veils. And today we're going to be talking about the Order of the Indigo Veil, also known as the followers of Indicus. Indicus, who is the icon of the Indigo Veil, is perhaps one of the enigmatic members of the Pantheon, because that is not even though the irony here is that although Indicus is his name, he is actually called Veritas by his followers, as he is perceived to embody the very concept of truth in the flesh. Now, followers of Indigo are in particular seekers and advocates for the truth in all its manifestations, and perceiving that there is only one truth in any given circumstance. Their choices of magical effects tend to be revelatory, edifying, and validating. They counteract illusion and misdirection and use other methods to call on forces that be to verify and validate data in terms of things such as contracts and even general agreements. Furthermore, with their ability to be truth verifiers, they are called on quite often to be the source of validation and verification of anything that is claimed in terms of truth. And they are, perhaps like the Ruberics, very disciplined. And often they would go out of their way to even avoid half-truths, and so therefore sometimes seen as being blunt or even abrasive sometimes in their responses to those that might question them. The Indicines, as they are called as a group, the followers of Indicus, tend to support the idea of free will only as far as it does not break the boundary between truth and falsehood. Ironically, therefore, Indicus is as far removed from both the concept of power and of change, because, of course, in the minds of the Indicines, there are no changes and truth is always constant. So they are quite often followed by players who wish to seek out the truth in circumstances, and tends to lead to some very dynamic interactions. All right, so now we're going to move over to another section, and this is the Game Master's Toolbox. And one of the secrets of being a good role-play game master is being able to keep a group together. And so today we're going to look at several methods to work to keep your groups on the same track, playing regularly, and maintaining even in the torrential, maybe not the right word. It's not raining yet, so it is in Potiphar, but not here. The idea of these. What is I looking for? There was a word I was looking for. I just almost had it there on the tip of my tongue. Not even torturous. I don't even know what it was. These trying times, the idea of being able to hold a gaming group together and play on a regular basis seems to be in a time-honored and time-challenged issue. We always are having problems keeping groups together. And so let's talk about some ways we can do that. The first one, by far, set and try to keep to a schedule. In the world of role-playing games, the players tend to have very busy schedules. We are busy people nowadays, and so it's kind of hard. But if you dedicate to keeping a regular schedule, maybe it's only once a month. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks. In my case, maybe it's only once a day, the idea of being able to set and hold to a schedule is really important, because when you hold a schedule and maintain it and keep your session going week over week over week, it gives people a confidence and a kind of a feeling of obligation to be a part of it. If they miss a session, it's on them, and so therefore they do what they can to be a part of what you're doing. So by holding and setting and keeping a regular schedule, you give them reasons to want to maintain the continuity of it, and therefore it becomes part of their pattern, and they will actually move things around to make it happen. I've got some friends who have said they would move heaven and earth to be on Nycos, and so that obviously, as a game master, feels good, but the reality is that every games group wants to be able to maintain that continuity. In today's chaotic world, there we go, it's difficult to do so. So that's the first one. Next thing is make sure that in any case, when you have a group of players together, make sure you honor and respect each other. In the world today, it's so difficult to find people who are your tribe, that are part of your community. And I'm always, as you may know because of these videos, I'm doing everything I can to expand the boundaries of Nycos and bring more people in. So if you are interested in being part of our community, definitely you want to follow the link down below and join our Discord, so you can communicate with me both through the verbal channel, but also to perhaps become a member of one of our play groups. We have several. We have one that's associated with our Patreon account that gives you special insider information in that games group, because it's exclusive to those that are supporters, and other events and such that we do. But the idea of keeping the story respectful and maintaining the continuity with the players. In other words, giving each player their own portion of the story. Make sure everybody's got their equal share of the time, and that you honor what they have as their inputs. These are really important. The third one, and this has nothing to do actually with the game, it has to do with being a communicator. If you are gathering together on a regular basis, that's a great way to start communication, but it's far more important to maintain the communication outside of the game session. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of how much time a 4-hour session is compared to the hundreds of hours that we have in a week, I think it's 200, I don't even know the number, but the idea is that you want to be able to communicate on a regular basis. One of the reasons why we utilize the Discord is so that we have a way to keep tabs on what's going on. If there's a challenge coming up or a schedule, I mean, even if you're keeping a schedule, it's sometimes okay to adjust, but you have to make sure that you communicate with everyone. I'm a former. I used to be an air traffic controller. See there, my speech pattern messing me up. My upper lip is acting crazy today. If you communicate and you share information with the other players on a regular basis, then they know when there's going to be a change. And if there needs to be an adaptation on a single week basis, sure, go ahead and adjust and adapt. I try to juxtapose this with the keep and set a schedule because you don't want to become so adjustable that you no longer have a frame. So definitely try to hold to your schedule, but once in a while it's good. Additionally, quite frankly, gameplay is only a part of communication, right? When we are in a games group, we are connecting with other people and we are part of a community and we are more than just ourselves. And so by staying in communication, we definitely build on that community aspect. Now, next part. Because of the fact that we've got these large gaps of time between sessions, make sure you allow for time for kibitzing. And I know that might be cultural appropriation, but the idea here is that you should have the opportunity for players to engage with each other and share the joys and excitements and the downsides and the dangers of the game sessions that they're playing in. And to do that, you need to kind of give them the ability to kibitz. Man, today this is acting up. Give them time to talk about the game, to carry on conversations about what's going on, and to let them be playful with it. Sure, their memories are going to adjust, and sometimes they're going to remember things quite differently than the actual sessions, but that's okay. We're trying to build on our collective consciousness, if you will. Now, this next one may seem a little crazy and maybe a little bit kind of Jordan Peterson-ish, but keep your play area tidy and comfortable. You want people who come to your table to want to be there and to be a part of what you're doing. So therefore, have plenty of room for them to sit, places for them to put their stuff. Get your own belongings out of the way so that they can have their play space easy to use and enjoyable so that they want to come back. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is that we all have such busy schedules. Why would we do something that is difficult when we can do something that's easy, right? That's our biggest challenge in the world today, is that we've got way too much convenience, so we forget sometimes that we should have at least some portion of obligation to other people. Now the next one, this is for games for storytellers, and I'm looking at me when I'm saying that, if you know what I'm saying. I'm looking at you, yes, but I'm also looking at me, because the reality is that if we don't vary the type and intensity of our sessions. Hello and welcome. We are on the air right now. I'm dealing with Game Master's Toolbox. How are you doing today?
All right.
Ah, there he is. Welcome back, Abletop. So we're talking about secrets to keep a games group together, and I know this is a place that's near and dear to your heart, so you walked right in at the right time. So I'm sure you're going to have some responses to the things I've already said. But were you here? Did you hear the previous parts about setting a schedule and all of that, or did you just now jump on blind?
Just now jumped on blind
Okay,
because
so
I
that's
was.
okay. That's okay. I'm flexible. I bend at the elbows and the knees, at least. What we're talking about is the ways to keep a games group together, and I know that's something that you have battled for decades. So, the first thing you have to do is set a schedule, and this is in the pre-game period, in the pre-session 0 time frame. You need to make sure that you can talk with all the members and make sure that you've got a general idea of a schedule.
Yeah, that actually has been working for my current group.
Right.
We've been keeping to our schedule for the most part.
Good. So the main thing is to set the schedule and then recognize there'll be days and times when it doesn't happen. Like my Wednesday group, one of my private tables, we weren't able to hold this week. But on point 3, we'll come back to that in a second. But the idea is that you set the schedule, and then you know that's when you're going to do it. And then if something happens and it has to adjust off, you'll still remember it for the following week. And
Yeah.
the main thing about keeping that schedule is try to keep it over a period of time so that the players get used to putting it onto their calendars. Because there's so many things that can fill our time nowadays that if you set it up as well, we're going to try to play on Saturdays, but we might do it Sunday afternoon, or maybe we'll get an extra session in on Tuesday. When you start thinking that way, the players no longer see it as a regular thing. So try to always keep to your schedule. If you have extra time and want to play extra sessions, that's fine, but never make it a replacement for your regular game. All right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the next point is going to jump off of that one for a second, and I just want to talk about it because I know you've also run into this challenge, and that is you need to make sure your players all know that they need to honor and respect each member for their own abilities. In other words, don't expect player X to play the same way that player Y plays, or try to play the same psychological game that the others are, because each person is going to bring to the table their own talent and their own gifts. And so we want to make sure we recognize and honor that among each member so that you're not showing any favoritism. Because when you start to show that, when you start to show you like one person's response perhaps more commonly than another person's, then you're leaving yourself open for that person to simply stop coming, and they'll use whatever excuse they need to because they're really feeling dissatisfied. So make sure that you're honoring and respecting your players. I know, Scott, this is not a problem you would ever face because you're an angel. But I know that I have run into situations in my own games where I have driven people off by having to being put in a situation where it's player A or player B and you can't have it both ways and blah blah blah. So, and to avoid that, make sure you honor and respect each player, each member for their own specific gifts and skills.
Yeah, that's important.
Um,
Once you recognize what those gifts and skills are in the
well,
beginning,
that's really comes into this next one, and that is communication, right? You have to get to know the person as well as the character. If all you do is say, we're going to be playing on Sundays and you got to be there at 2:00 and I expect you to be in character and we're running with the story at that moment, that person might need, a few minutes of person time. They want to be, maybe they got something going on where they need affirmation or they need somebody to offer some advice. You need to make sure that the communication is ongoing even outside of game.
yeah, and that's I feel like that's one of my weaknesses personally because I've noticed I do not communicate well online.
Well, I can say that one thing that I do know, Scott, and this is not about you at all, but the need for communication as a storyteller is hypercritical because players will talk with each other outside of game and can start to create false understandings, or there may be even some bullying going on. There may be some gaslighting or other things that could be going on in the background. And if you're not staying in communication on more than a session only period, then you're setting yourself up for the group to fail, because even if it doesn't have anything to do with you, if you're not able to check out what's going on with everybody in the group and everybody's staying, friends with each other, you can have people all of a sudden they don't show up and you don't know why. And maybe nobody knows because nobody checked on that person. We have you remember, I'm sure you remember talking about, I can't even see, I'm now falling out of it because and my brain just froze on me. Badger, one of the guys that we talked with a lot behind the scenes, he's got medical problems, but when he got into issues where he had to go to the hospital, none of us had any communication with him at all for 3 months.
Yeah.
And you when he doesn't show up at a game session and you don't hear from him, many of us unfortunately go to the out of sight, out of mind, right? Now, in my case, I have to say that by using my at everyone in the Discord, I was able to get a message to him that he was able to respond to. But he's been in and out of a hospital for better than a month and had no way to get a hold of us because he
Yeah.
didn't have anything but, he didn't have the Discord because he was one of the guys that was in before we had the hack. And so therefore didn't get picked back up. And so getting him back into the group this last week was the first time we've heard from him in 3 months. And that's not good, you know. And the fact was, he was strong enough as a person who wanted to play to actually reach back across that line. But how many people that say they're going to come to your game and don't show 3 weeks later, you don't ever hear from them again because they're now on to their next thing and they're no longer communicating with you. So
Yeah, and
by setting up a purpose and a means to communicate with everyone on a regular basis really helps to fix that. Now, the next one I think you're going to like, Scott. And this one, this happens in my groups every session. Make sure that you provide enough time for the players to kibitz. You've got to let the players chew on what's happened in the sessions and remember, when this thing happened or when they lit the dragon on fire or whatever, and let them talk about those wonderful moments. Now, you don't give them too much time because it takes away from the gameplay time, but you do want them to at least feel comfortable enough to talk about the game outside of the game, because that's how you build interest in it and therefore keep them playing, right? So now we're caught up. Wow, my English is so good today. We're now caught up with where I was, and that's it. The next one is to make sure that you ensure that the play space area is tidy. Now, you just were mentioning that you have difficulty sometimes in the online session, but don't you agree the tables are a lot clearer? That was a joke. If you're playing online, there's no table that can get messed up, right? But the idea is that you want to make sure that when you have people, especially like you do in live games, you want to make sure that each person has enough room for their goods. They have to be able to get to their dice, and the dice rolling tables have to be big enough and all of that. Because if you make it so that it's uncomfortable, they may simply avoid coming and giving you every kind of excuse not to be there because they didn't feel they were welcome, or they didn't feel safe, or they didn't feel comfortable in the space that you gave them. So I know that sounds a little why is my brain freezing today on names? Maybe a little bossy to tell people to clean up their areas or whatever. But I am reminded of when I was married folk. Of course, if I wanted to have my friends over to play, I had to make sure the house was clean. Now that was, in a default condition, the house usually is. But if you're going to have if you're going to have a game where you're going to be rolling dice, then you need to make sure there's a place for them to roll dice, a place for them that feels comfortable to them. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Because, that's just kind of common sense. But maybe I've just been doing this for years, and what I feel is common sense when it comes to this may not be common sense to everybody.
Well, also, when you're playing at a game store, it's a little different because that's always going to be a clean space, right? You're not going to have anything to do with that. But this is just in reference of when you're playing at home games and things like that.
Yeah, which I do a home game once a month, and I always make sure that everybody has enough room. We don't get too messy with that.
That's fair.
Little crowded, but
yeah. Well, it's hard to have big groups in a small house, and although you have a nice expansive house, it's sometimes still hard to keep people communicating when you've got groups that are moving to another part of the house and whatever during the game. So you just have to make sure that everything feels comfortable enough that your players will re-engage, over time.
Yeah.
The next one, and this, again, I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply to you, but you have to make sure you vary the type and intensity of your sessions. I've got a friend who's very big into the historicity of the adventure world, and he wants to make sure everybody holds to the world as it is and is very serious in their sessions. Well, you can only do that for so long because players like the idea of sometimes having let's say it's always fights. If you're always doing combat because that's what everybody thinks they want, You do that 6 or 8 weeks in a row, you're going to have somebody go, come on, let's do something else. It's why not?
Yeah.
Why can't we do a puzzle only game? Or maybe instead we have a pure, heaven forbid, role play game where we actually sit and have conversations with other people. You know?
Those are the worst for me as a DM, but anyway.
Well, they can be, but I like leaving it to the players, and so make it so a session where they have to talk to each other, so they don't. It's not you, it's them. It's the I've lore dumped on 4 weeks, and 2 of you weren't here 2 weeks ago, and 2 of you weren't here last week, and so all 6 of you now have to talk more about what happened. I sit back and let them talk, right?
Yeah. Then you get into a situation. Well, okay, this has happened to me. I will let them talk, and then they stop talking. It takes me a minute to realize, oh, they're waiting on me to tell them the
Right,
next.
right. So it's a matter of learning how to deal with it. That's true. And my point about the varying is that just have fun. Don't feel like you have an obligation to only be a lore dump factory. You know, if all you do is
Yeah.
pontificate and give them data, at some point there's no agency for them. So why would they be involved? Now the next one is one of my favorites, and I have to be careful with this because I love to employ cliffhangers. I'm sure Scott doesn't know anything about cliffhangers in my game. They never happen, do they? No, never. Now, the idea is that you want to use them judiciously because if you did it every week, if you do it every week, the player's going to feel like, well, we never accomplish anything. We're always stuck. So sometimes have a session where they actually conclude a puzzle. Wow! And let them celebrate. Yay! And when they get a bunch of cash, let them go buy stuff. Yay! And to me, that's the part that's the hardest. When they're running around spending fake money on fake stuff that they don't really need, just like, but players love that stuff. So make sure you do that. And I think the real key to keeping games group running week over week and month after month is you got to be having fun.
Yes.
I mean it very seriously. When we get to the point where going to a game becomes a burden, it's no longer fun, and we won't make the effort. So you literally want to have them hungry for more every session when it's done. So cliffhangers help sometimes, but not all the time. You know, sometimes people just like to have sat around and kibitzed for most of the evening. I've had many game sessions where that ends up happening, where the idea was we're going to have this storyline and we're going to go from point A to point B and everything's going to go great, and the players decide, no, we're going to sit around the bar all day.
I've had a couple situations recently where one of the players in particular wants to talk to the leaders of the town, and having to come up with those characters on the spot because they're not clearly defined is
right.
It's strenuous, but I make it work.
Right.
It honestly leads to some of the funniest points in the book, in the story for us. At least I think so.
Well, I just realized something too, Scott. We're both treating this like we're talking to an audience. We're really not. This is not how we talk to each other, usually.
No, it is not.
So we need to I mean, we're having fun, don't get me wrong, but I need for us to actually have these conversations as you and me having the conversation, because somebody walking into the room feels like we're both yelling at other people. I don't mean to do it that way, and I don't mean to always ask you to affirm what I'm saying. So if there's something that you disagree with me on, or have your own ideas that I haven't mentioned, please include them as well. Okay? I don't want you to feel
Of
like
course.
Well, I just didn't want it to feel like it's a talk show where I'm
Yeah.
leading the conversation and the charge, and I want you to, lockstep. Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Alvin. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, no, I don't want that. You know that. So, alrighty. Having said that, what are can you think of one or two ideas of what you would recommend for other people? Maybe maybe in a positive light of something that you have done in the past that really helped to keep a group together, or the kind of things maybe that you feel that you've run into that I haven't covered.
I don't know how to cover, like, I don't know whether you covered the walkout, because I have had that happen to me once before.
A walkout? Tell us more. I don't know what you mean.
Well, okay, not my current campaign, but the campaign I did a campaign maybe 2 years ago, and it was 8 people. It ended up going down to two because one person left and his 5 friends he brought with him left with him. So I ended up stopping the campaign because I didn't see the point in continuing it with 2 or 3, with this father and son. I loved them, like, I adored playing with them, but I could not continue that story with just them, even though there was a structure to do it with 2 players or whatever.
Well,
I just felt
okay. So
deflated.
this leads me to a couple of questions. Uh, as far as walkouts, now I know what you're talking about. I've actually had one. People talk about the game master and the TPK, and I've had at least one TPW, and that wasn't completely true. That was a player walkout on everybody but the one player that they had asked me to ask to leave. So that was actually on me, sort of. But the the question, uh, the larger sense of the question is, number one, you had somebody that was playing in your group that was so instrumental to the group that when he left, they all left. That to me doesn't sound healthy for your campaign. For that one player to be the one who drove the story for them enough that they felt like they didn't want to stick to find out what happened without him. So maybe you were looking at your group differently. You should have really considered to be a group of 3. You, the young man and his father, and this guy, and his followers or his friends. You see what I'm saying? They weren't there to play the game with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know that now.
Yeah,
Didn't
well,
at the time.
we all learned it the hard way, right? You can never learn any of this stuff the easy way. It has to be when you slam your head against a wall. So
And that has led me to a new symptom recently.
go ahead.
I find it very hard to both find people, and then when I do find people, I find myself wondering, can I trust said people?
Okay, so here's a phrase I want you to memorize, and this is true of everybody listening: benefit of the doubt. If you live your life worrying about what other people are thinking and what other people are doing, you are missing the point. You have to assume, you have to assume that the person that tells you he wants to play sincerely wants to play. And therefore you treat him like somebody who's playing the game.
Yeah.
And it's only when you realize that he's not that you need to have another conversation. You can't let yourself be burdened with worrying about what other people's motives are, because their motives are their own, and their motives will change as much as everything else. Minute by minute, day by day, they're gonna choose their own path, so to speak. So, having said that, it is an interesting conundrum, but you really don't need to borrow from tomorrow the problems that there are there, because they haven't happened, right? They're at this moment they're playing with you and you're enjoying it. So
Yeah.
accept their statements, play the game with them, and it's only when you start. I mean, if they're not there if they're being disingenuous, you're gonna feel it. You can go, dude, this isn't working. You're not engaging in the game. I don't know what you're doing, but this has not been fun for me. So it's a matter of you. When I say having fun, it actually means you as the storyteller too. You as the game master have to be having as much fun as well. Because if you're not, if it's work for you. Now, let me clarify. I am a professional game master. I have run games when I didn't feel like it. I have run games for groups that I didn't want to. So, because of money. So that's different. I was working in those instances. But generally
Yes.
speaking, if you're a game master and they're not putting money in your pocket, you better be having fun. My dad always said it this way. He said that in life, you either need to make a lot of money or have a lot of fun. And I've had jobs where I must have been really having fun because I didn't make a lot of money. So I guess the point here is that you need to really enjoy what you're doing, because if you're doing it for any other reason, then that reason takes over and you're no longer doing it. Even in the case where I'm a professional game master, there's been points where I got to the point where I was cookie cutter, chopping up the story and throwing it little, bits and pieces, and I wasn't doing my job. I wasn't being the game master I should have been for the money, because I let that issue get in the way. So don't do that. I'm telling you.
Okay, I feel like that is, from my experience, when you say cookie cutter, I feel like that happened to us last iteration a little bit. You've since fixed that, but
Well, I think there were so many other issues we could add into that mix. I don't really want to go there, but yeah,
yeah,
there was a lot that went into why it became cookie cutter, and one of them was it was COVID. We had been doing the games for 2 years nonstop every week, ritually and religiously, to the point where it was no longer any of us really having fun. But that's subject to the times. Now, I do want to get on to the next section of this because I want to show off. This is when we get to see my other camera layout. So let me switch to that. All right. So thank you for being with me during the toolbox. Now, if you're a viewer and you want more information about what we're talking about, make sure you put a comment in the comment section. We respond as quickly as we can. This is a conversational channel, and although in the past I've been somewhat more of a pontificate, I'm endeavoring to definitely be more interactive and communicative and friendly. So let's move on here. Alrighty, there's my other setup. Yay! So now you get to see what my office looks like. Ta-da! Of course, it's like every other office. It's strategically set up to promote role-play games and the like. Miniatures behind me on one side, role-playing books on the other. But I wanted to talk about something, this being the beginning of the holiday season. I want to talk about what NycosRPG and Nycos Launchpad is to me, and that is that I believe it is becoming dedicated to the proposition. Now, that phrase I'm stealing directly from the Gettysburg Address, right? In that statement, he says he's dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, blah, 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 blah. Right? So I am dedicated to the following propositions, the entire series of them. And I want to see if you can see why we should be possibly dedicated to the same thing, no matter where you are and what you're doing. I believe that I am dedicated to the proposition that we are all still children. Yes, I am 60. I know that's 6 decades, and there are people in this audience that go, wow, I didn't know anybody that old still lived or could even use a camera. I know, I'm being silly. But the idea is that we're all kids. We're still kids. Inside, when we're grown up, look at how many of our terms, even when we're in work, we talk about gaming the system. We talk about keeping score. We talk about making it to the finish line. All of these game reference terms are in our lives, right? We are still children, and I don't know whether that's in your case, whether that means you're being childlike and innocent and hopeful and enthusiastic like I am, or if it means you're taking the more childish side. But the reality is that we're all kids, and even if somebody gives you grief, you have to think about it from the standpoint of kids in a playground. You're going to have problems. You're going to have issues. And it's how we learn to communicate. I also believe that I also am dedicated to the proposition that we are meant to become more. In most people's lives, they follow their path through college to get to a career and then they go into the job and they absolutely hate what they're doing. What I'm talking about is you need to be able to recognize that there is more to life. If you know anything about me, you know I've had more jobs than most people have had ideas. I'm a former air traffic controller, former microwave antenna installer, former cellular technician, landscape owner. I owned a landscaping company. I owned a window washing company. I owned a delivery service. I worked with one of the largest producers of trading cards in the world, the largest producer of trading cards in the world, Konami Digital Entertainment. I worked as the marketing director for Gamma. I've been a short order cook. I have just, you name it, I've done it. And the issue here is that we're always becoming more than we were before. In the last 10 years, I've written 350 books. I mean, how many people can say that they've chased every possible avenue of their life? And kids do it. When you're a child, one minute you're an astronaut, the next minute you're a police officer, and the next day you're riding the range taking care of your cattle. So we change all the time, and we always are trying to become more, because that's how life is. One of the reasons why people like role-play games is that you're able to advance through the character's life cycle, becoming, whether you're following a hero's path and you're working towards being the selfless hero, or if you're following the redemption path where you've done bad things and you're wanting to become better. These are all examples of us wanting to be more. And so I'm dedicated to the proposition that is so. I also believe, and I hold strongly to the proposition, that we are all communicators. Whether you're an individual sitting at your table at your house, wringing your hands about when the next bill is coming due and what you're going to do for work, or you're dealing with whether or not you're going to have relationships with other people outside of your family, and whether people are going to like you, or whether you're going to have people show up at your games table. These are all issues that we have, but we're all communicators. We are all talkers. My dad was in sales most of my life, sold everything you can think of, from cattle to vacuum cleaners. And in all of the different types of work that he did, he was always a salesman. And he would say, sales is what we all are. We are all salesmen, because we are either selling ourselves and who we are to other people, or the other side, we're buying all of their garbage. And the reality is that still is a communications process. And so I believe that we are obligated to work on becoming better at communication. I believe, and I dedicate myself to the proposition that exploration is in our nature. We are curious beings. They say curiosity killed the cat, and that is only part of the phrase. I know there's more to it, and my friend Jean, if she was here right now, she would quote the rest of it. But we are always looking for something. There's an itch in our brain where our brain actually triggers dopamine when we're faced with an unresolved challenge. When there's a problem that pops up, we immediately feel a rush, both a positive of joy and a little bit of excitement and nervousness at the same time, because it's something that's unknown and we don't know whether it's even knowable. What I find fascinating is that exploration gene, if you will, is there regardless of what your passion is, whether you are a sculptor or whether you're a painter, role-play gamer, ice skater, whatever. You want to explore your possibilities. A friend of mine's in the skateboard community, and he's always trying to find new tricks. He's trying to find new places to ride. He's looking for new experiences, and that's what exploration is. And because we know that, a group of role players are one of the greatest places for you to explore the possibilities, because although you may not be able to get up and run a 500-meter dash, you certainly can feel the experience of it if the game mechanic gives you enough of a compelling feeling of that same rush. I also believe, I also am dedicated to the proposition that curiosity is our basic resource code. We are meant to be curious. We're meant to question. I remember when I was a kid, one of the biggest issues was that the media was worried about guys like Timothy Leary, because he was very much avant-garde, very much on the edge, and he constantly said, question authority. And at the time, that was thought to be a bad thing. But the questioning authority is what we do. It's how we learn. When we're children, why do we reach for the stove when our parents say, don't touch the stove? Because we want to know why. We want to understand that. You know?
The minute you say don't do something to a kid, they're gonna be like, huh?
Exactly. And it's in that moment of discovery, or that moment of desire, that we're getting our biggest high, if you will, internally. That's what we're meant to do. Now, I do also believe, and I hold very much to the proposition, that sharing is a natural condition, and I think it may actually be one of the reasons for our greatest problems in our culture, is that we all want to share ours. What we have, we want to share with others, and we think we're doing so that they will be edified. But that's not what it's about. It's like, that's only part of it. If I'm sharing with you, then I should, by quid pro quo, be allowing you to share with me. And maybe we disagree. Maybe we have differences of opinion. If we don't learn how to share what we have, and to accept the sharing of others, we never cross those bridges. We never answer the unanswerable, because we're so busy worrying about what we're going to say next, instead of listening to what the other people say. And I think that this sharing is essential, and to me it's mind-blowing that we do not recognize that our sharing sometimes is misplaced. In other words, if I am with a group of people who I can tell are going to be, the things that are going on around, they are not going to be amenable to my opinion, I probably should just go ahead and not share. even though my desire is, and my optimal condition is to share, maybe what I need to do instead is listen, be on the receiving end, and let them express their position. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. It just means that I'm being decent to them and letting them gain the benefit of sharing their side. I also am dedicated to the proposition that the most common denominator between humanity, between all species, all nations, all beings, is the imagination. Ironically, it is probably the one place where we have the least commonality in terms of use, but I believe that's changeable. That's why NycosRPG came to be existent, the reason why the Launchpad has been my vehicle for trying to get this information out. And that is that I do believe that when we learn to share, we learn to become more, and we learn to utilize our imagination for the purposes of communal conversation, like a role-play game. We are giving ourselves the opportunity to learn whole new vocabularies and engage other people at the mental space that they are currently in. Now, Scott, I'm going to ask you a question. When you are in one of the situations in a game, in one of the games that I'm running, and I give you a description, what is your first inclination once you have a mental inclination on what the place looks like? What's the first thing that you think of?
Depends on the situation, to be honest. Lately, I've been like, okay, what red herring has Don trying to lead me into with this description?
Well, I guess what I'm particularly asking is, what I have found is that when I give a description, a narrative about the location, the first thing just about everybody thinks about is, where am I? In that scene, in that description you just gave, where are we? Where are we standing? What is that? What perspective do we have on this scene? What is our paradigm? And because without that, you can't make any choices about your actions, right? You have to know where you are and what's around you. That's what I would
Okay. it, depending on scene to scene, the players it should flow well enough that the players should be able to know where they are as the scene changes. But maybe I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle.
Well, I get that. I get that. And this is, I guess, a matter of the experiential, and we're talking in the space of possible people who have never role played in their lives. So there are going to be levels of understanding that a veteran will have, so that the storyteller will be making sure to wrap the story around them. But what I'm
Yes.
getting at is, even with that, it's still okay. You described a rainfall, and we're standing on a porch, I think. But am I out where I can be touched by the rainwater, or am I back behind the edge of the raindrop? You know, am I protected or not?
That's where you allow the players to ask questions to get clarification on where they are.
Exactly. And my point here is that imagination, that shared space that we have, I can describe all day long, but if I don't include the answers to your questions, then you can't be in that space. You can't interact with it because you don't know what your limits are, you know? So if I describe it as, you're on the edge of a walk, you're on the edge of a walk and the rain is smattering down, and across the street there's another building and it has a sloped roof. It looks like it'd be a lot more comfortable than where you are. Then I haven't given you enough information. How far away is it? How long will I be in the rain? I mean, if it's 300 feet across there, by the time you get there, you're going to be soaked anyway, so it really wouldn't be that helpful.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of realizing that imagination, the use of imagination and living in a theater of the mind, you're giving yourself automatically to having the idea of communication, because you need feedback on what's going on in the world. I need feedback to know where you are compared to everyone else. I need, it's a two-way street, and we all become better communicators through it.
Okay, the counterpoint to that, though, I feel is everybody wants to use a virtual tabletop these days, and that, to me, is limiting.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right on both points. Number one, most people want to use a VTT. Second is that people want to. What was the other point you said that they want to use a VTT, and they want to know things will be set in stone. But I'm going to make a revolutionary statement here. There is a difference between a role play game and a role play game. If you think about it too hard, you'll go like. But the difference between a role play game and a role play game is that a role play game, you're actually engaging in the role of the character, and it actually does only actually occur within our minds. If you think about it, you sitting at your table right now, you're in front of your computer talking to me. You are conversing with a person that's God knows how many miles we are apart, and yet we are sharing the communication space, right? We are taking turns talking, and we are describing things. That is role play. That is, I'm the role of a host, and you're of a guest host on the show. But this whole concept here is that we are communicating in a theater of the mind. And role playing, ROLL playing, is when you take a rule system that says things like you move 30 feet per round, you have one action, one bonus action, and one reaction. Those limitations and boundaries are built into the mechanism, and therefore players want that to be visible so that they can, pardon the phrase, optimize their actions. So to overcome that situation, you need to find ways to drag your players from role play back to role play. Now I know I keep using the same words because they're homophonic, but the whole point here is that if the game experience for a player is based on dice and charts and what's on a piece of paper, that's far different from three people standing on a porch in a rainstorm, right? So because there's no need for dice when we're just actually doing the role play portion. It's only when you come to some place where you need a variable, right?
They do plan, like, whenever I start getting into the speaker talks, that's the role playing, that's not, but, because there is no dice to say what the speaker says or whatever, it's just
Oh no,
me.
there is in Dungeons and Dragons. You've got persuasion, you've got intimidation, you've got investigation. You got ways to avoid ROLE role play by using ROLL role play. It's built in, so you can completely avoid role play. And the trick is that you, as a game master, if you acknowledge that role play is actually the conversation, then you're really talking about everything being role play in that aspect, and that's where theater of the mind comes in, because you, as the storyteller, if you fill in their gaps, so to speak, in their thinking and their dimensional representation of where they are within the story, then they can make decisions without needing to see a map. And if you're doing it in such a way that it's fulfilling what the players are wanting, then they won't look to the tabletop. It's only when it's like, I think I told you about the adventure of the red hot pink Pookie Moo Moo, right? Did I tell you that story?
No, I haven't heard this one actually.
All right, so the adventure was there's a guy named his name's John Page, very good friend of mine, lives up north. He was game mastering and had built his map out, and the players had found the edge of the map, and they walked through. He had actually described a door on the side of the map that would lead them off the map. So they opened that door and said, that's where we want to go. Well, not sure what to do. He said, well, it's a 10 by 10 antechamber. There are 3 exits, one to the left, one to the right, one straight ahead. There's a carpet on the floor. There's nothing in the room. You're going the wrong way. So the players chose the door on the opposite wall. You open the door, and it's a 10-foot by 10-foot antechamber with 3 exits, left, right, and straight ahead. There's a carpet on the floor. You're going the wrong way. They kept doing that because they knew that it was annoying him. They went 10 rooms in and then made a right turn and then started zigzagging back just to mess with him. But the point of this red hot pink Pookie Moo Moo story is this. When your narrative is uninteresting, then the players want something to fulfill their imagination. They literally want to see the space they're in. I can bring up a story that I know you know about because you were the guy in it. There's a certain Pongid rogue who had finally gotten to use his gray-bladed sword on greylings. And I bet you still could describe what that hallway looked like. Mm-hmm. The rain falling outside and the party members protecting your back as you...
Swarms of greylings, we were, like, I remember lightning outside, and I just went berserk.
Right, but you remembered what it felt like running down that hallway, gleefully screaming, I got to use my sword! I got to use my sword! I remember how much you remembered about it. So my point here is that the story was narrative. We weren't using miniatures at that point. We were online. We didn't have any way to do that. So we were online, and it was a narrative. And yes, I gave a description of a location, and I gave the choices and options you had to make, and you certainly felt you were there, don't you think so?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. At that time, I got Xavier. At that time, was still interesting.
I argue that it will always be interesting, if nothing else, because of the rest of the story that was left behind. So I think that we could talk about that a million hours. So I'm not going to go there now. But that actually leads to the next part, and that is, I believe, and I hold the proposition. I am dedicated to the proposition that telling stories is the most treasured skill in the world. If you can tell a good story, you can accomplish anything. Because if you can inspire, if you can educate, if you can entertain through your words, it is more valuable than any other skill on the planet. And what I find most fascinating about that is that it doesn't matter what your personal limitations are in terms of that. If you can tell a story, even if, let's say you didn't have the ability to speak, if you were a writer and you could convey stories, conveying stories is more valuable than any other skill. I totally am dedicated to that proposition.
I have no argument against it.
Yes. Then my final one here. Individuality is trumped only by commonality. And that sounds weird. And it's a big mouthful, and it's the way I used to talk. So let me try to bring it down and make it clear. Every person has a right and a privilege and an obligation to be their own unique self. You need to be able to hold your personal beliefs so strongly that they are yours and yours alone. But this needs to, and is required to be overcome only by the fact that we are on this rock together. We are all beings sharing this locale. And you do not have the right to impose your individuality as law on anybody else. And when we understand that our commonality is our boundaries, that we literally have to think about the fact that there are other people on the planet that disagree with us or might have different views, it makes us necessarily be more us than we are me, if that makes sense. I have the right to be me all I want, but when it comes down to it, if I'm not sharing something that we all can do, I'm depriving all of us of something which is myself. And so therefore, the irony is that individuality, absolutely paramount, but it's actually tantamount, because it's tantamount to the community of everybody. We really all should be trying to, as the saying goes, get along. So these are my 9 points that I am dedicated to. For, I guess you would consider this sort of to be way in advance to be my resolutions for the end of the year. These are my dedications, if yes. So they're sort of the same.
A bit early, but okay.
What'd you say?
A little bit early.
A little bit early. Well, if I don't say them now, I'll forget them before I get to it, right? Not only that, now I've got them in written form and I've got them in video form, so people can hold me accountable early. You see how that works? Alrighty, so now we're going to move over. 9 things you need to know. And this is for you, those of you who are viewers, and those of you like Scott who need to know these things. And when you hear all of these things, I think, especially since Scott's already a member of our community, I think you'll see what we're talking about here. The first thing you need to know, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are already one of us. And when I say us, I'm speaking of the community of the world of Nycos. I'm talking about the community of humanity. I'm talking about the community of role players. I'm talking about any community of which I am a part. You're already one of us because you are watching this video. Whether you caught it at the very beginning and only come back after the 3rd or 4th time to try to eat it all, or maybe I've been able to break it down and this is one standalone piece. If you catch that one piece, that you are one of us already, then you'll start to get an idea of what it is we're doing and what I've been trying to do and what I've been struggling with for the last couple of years. The next thing is you have to know, and you do need to know, that your opinions and experiences matter. People who tell you otherwise are trying not to befriend you. They're not trying to be helpful. Your opinions matter. Does that mean your opinions are always right?
No.
No. That's important. We'll come back to that in a minute, but just realize that you have every right to your opinion. You have every right to share your opinion when the opportunity affords itself. You don't have the right to be heard. You only have the right to choose free speech. We'll come back to that. But it does bring us right specifically to the point that it's okay to make and to admit mistakes. I can tell you one of my biggest challenges that I have over the 9 iterations that I have been running the stories of Nycos. Every single iteration, I've had at least one person who never understood that it was okay to say they were wrong. And I don't want to be a preacher who's proclaiming judgment on anybody. Instead, what I'm trying to say is it's okay. It's perfectly fine to make mistakes, but it's also okay, especially since you're one of us, to share your knowledge that you made a mistake. It's okay. We can admit to these things. But the next point is also true. You need to know that what you do is every bit as important as what you say. I have friends who will tell me, "Oh, Jonathan, Game Master, I'm going to be at the game next week. I'm definitely going to make it." And they've been saying that for 7 months. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. You said what you wanted to say, and that was fine. But if you don't do as you say, or if you don't uphold it, then you're harming yourself as much as you're harming me, because you're not holding your own words as valuable. So it's very important to know that you need to be a doer as well as a speaker. And this is one of the situations I'm clearly pointing at this guy right here, because there are times when I've said things were going to happen, things were going to change, and they didn't because I was immature or I had other things going on. And it doesn't matter. It was times when I was wrong. Wait, did I just do that on air? I think I just said I was wrong. Whoa, horrible. Okay, but let's bring this back around. You need to know that the game begins again every single day. Life is a game. Matter of fact, one of my first books, my very first book that I wrote was Your Life, Your Game, Your Move. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a little autobiographical, but it's also really a treatise on how to establish a life that you see every experience in life as a form of gameplay. Because when you are playing, you are remember all those triggering of endorphins, of curiosity of what's going to happen next. These things all energize your life and give you a chance. But you have to realize that it happens and it begins again every day. So if yesterday sucked, if yesterday was horrible and you had many failures, you still can get back up, dust yourself off, look at the number of hours you've got left. And last time I checked, we all have the same number of hours in a day. So having that knowledge means that you can then begin the game again every day. And a clean slate means you can score points every time if you want. Maybe you're not even playing to win. You're just trying to play to survive. That's okay. This next line actually comes from a bit of Billy Joel and a little bit of Tony Robbins. Your mistakes and your triumphs are all yours. As the way Joel says it, your mistakes are the only things you can truly call your own. Well, so are your triumphs. When you stood your ground and you stood up to the bully, when you made your stand and you said, "I'm not going to take this anymore," when you got to the position where you were able to share your opinion and could hear the criticism without getting angry, those are triumphs that are yours as well. So just realize that good and bad life that you have is uniquely yours. Remember I said individuality was important all the way up to commonality? In this case, your individuality is your crowning achievement. Whatever you have done in your life is what you have done. Now this next one, this one took a long time for me to get to, and this reason for specifically doing this show every night at 11 o'clock is this one, and that is you need to follow one course until successful. I've had so many careers in my life, and every single one of them, when I was there, was the best thing ever. From being an air traffic controller, to being an Uber driver, to owning a trucking company, to being a garbage dump driver, dump truck driver. These are all things that I've done, but all of them at the time that I was doing them, I was focused on that one course. And if you didn't notice, FOCUS, follow one course until successful, is focus. And if you can maintain your focus long enough, you will achieve greatness. Now, I'm saying this on the behalf of Nycos only because I know that it's not me anymore, it's us. And I'm trying every day to find ways to share this information and get it out. So I'm hoping if you're watching and listening, you kind of are at least getting a feel for this, and perhaps for at least a little while, run the race with me, assist me where you can and help us to build this channel. It's not about economic gain. It isn't. And anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something. There's no purpose for chasing money when money is only a medium of exchange, and you're giving away your hours for your dollars in most jobs. But you do need to stay on course until you reach whatever level of success you want to that thing. My dad was the best salesman in the world, according to me, but he did set national and world records, as far as I know, in terms of the production, in terms of sales, because he did not stop. In 1 month alone, he sold 61 vacuum cleaners. Now, it doesn't sound like that big of a number, but he was selling machines that were, in today's dollars, were about $10,000 a piece. And he sold 61 of them in a month and made what would be the equivalent of about 50 or 60 grand in 1 month. And I know there are people that make that kind of money on a daily basis, and they're looking at my little piddly show and going, yeah, you don't even know what you're talking about. But what I'm telling you is that if you follow your course, if you stay doing what you're doing, you will be a success. I've been a game master for 50 years, very close. And if nothing else, I am arguably the best game master you'll ever meet, because I have told stories to more than 10,000 players. I've had more personalities pass through the gates of the Nycos worldview than anybody else. I just can say that. I used to run an average of one game a week for all of the 50 years, but in reality, since COVID, I've been running an average of about 6 to 7 sessions a week. And when you are involved in any passion, that level, you're already a success. You just have to figure out how to capitalize on it, I guess. Now this brings us to
man, it's the key.
The next point is really the key. Life is a game. And I can prove that life is a game. You know how I know that life is a game? Life is a game because in any given instant, you have no control of what's going to happen in the next instant except what your choices will be. And that's exactly what happens in any game. You can talk about all the challenges you have in your life and all the possibilities and all the variables, but it comes down to the decisions you make. We are the players. We are all the players. Why not have fun? Why not accept our lot in life and say, okay, I've got 10% chance of me being on the air tomorrow. Okay, I got a lot better than that. I got closer to 100% chance, right? But it's up to me to make the path get there. And that's what life is. Life is that game that gets us from here to there. And I'm going to state it again. We started with it. You're already one of us. If you've spent the time watching this video, welcome to Nycos. If you haven't already joined us, make sure you click on the link down below to get a hold of our Discord information. Also, make sure you follow us so you can be aware of every new episode coming out. And check out our YouTube channel as well, because that's where we have the archive of all the videos that we've made over time. But the reality is that we're all citizens of Nycos. And I use Nycos as an acronym sometimes. And in this case, it's naturally your choice of systems. It's the world you choose to live in. And in this case, it's your choice of society. So it's naturally your choice of society is one where we are all the same. We all give each other honor and dignity and integrity, and we all listen to each other. Agree or disagree, we all are open to it. Now, there is a role-play revolution underway at NycosRPG.com, so make sure you get over there and get a copy of the rule book. There are PDFs of the player persona sheets. There is a quick play downloadable for free there as well. And also, if you want more information on the world, go to NycosRPG.info, which is the lore dump of all things Nycos. And I want to thank you all for having been here. I do have a final scroll that I want to provide. And there it is. So it has all of the contact information I'm talking about. For more stories about Nycos and the information about the world, check us out every night at 11 p.m. or so here on twitch.tv/NycosRPG. And also check us out on YouTube at NycosRPG. For additional information, and if you want to really become a part of the community and help us out, check out patreon.com/Nycos, as mentioned here down below, and join us and become a member of this and become part of this growing community that wants everybody to be having fun and playing games. I'm Jonathan Alvin, and that's Abletop. Thank you very much, Scott, for your time.
Good night, everybody.
All right, we'll talk to you guys all later. See you next time. Bye.